We've been waiting a long time to see Cody Bellinger in the lineup. That's today against the Angels. He'll DH. We're going to talk about having the Cubs marquee player back in the lineup finally and what that means. Talking about marquee players, MLB Pipeline released their Cubs 30 top prospect list, and it is really stacked. We're going to go through it and talk about those guys. And another small nick type injury to Nick Madrigal. How's that going to affect his campaign and this spring training? All that right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Let's get this thing started. And if you love the Cubs, hit that bell so you know when we're going to drop new content, including coming up soon, a sit down with Cubs 20 game winner, John Lieber, right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Peace, everybody. It's Mick Gillispie. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel today. And it really is a pleasure to talk baseball. I'm in spring training. Probably by the time I see you next, I'll be touchdown in Mesa. So that travel happening today. So if anything breaks after you see me right now, you're just going to have to hope that I'm off the plane so that we can get together and talk about it. With that said, I'm so excited, and maybe I'll run into some of you guys out there at Sloan Park or around town. Not at Don and Charlie's anymore. And if any of you guys ever went out there, Don and Charlie's was the hangout, and then they sold out. And I heard that Don Carson got into the Cactus League Hall of Fame. So congratulations. Always loved talking to Don. He was a good friend of ours, Gary Hughes, the late great Gary Hughes, and him were tight, and so that's how I knew him. And every time I head out to spring training, right off the bat, I'm thinking Don and Charlie's. But we're not going to get that opportunity this year. But we will talk a lot of Cubs baseball with you guys. And we got a lot to get into right now. And first off, talking about being back, Cody Bellinger is back. And he's going to be the DH against the Angels today. So finally, missed 2 weeks of camp. And, who knows how much. Now, he worked out. It's not like he was sitting around. And he knew that eventually he'd be with a team. And I'm sure that he's very honest when he says he intended to play for the Cubs. He wanted to play for the Cubs. Cubs wanted him too. And we're all glad it worked out. And so having him back in the lineup is going to be great. And if the Cubs are going to win the World Series, which it should be their goal every year, and it, I'm sure is their goal this season, they're going to have another MVP type of season from Bellinger. So you don't want to push it too hard as you put your feet back in the water of playing baseball. So the schedule looks like this: DH against the Angels, and then Friday and Saturday in the field for Bellinger. I'm sure he'll do like 5 innings and now, probably both of those games. He's taken live batting practice, said he felt good, had some hits, got to swing the bat, run the bases a little bit. He'd been working out with his trainer. So I don't expect anything but Cody Bellinger to be Cody Bellinger. And I'm sure when new manager Craig Counsell sees him in the lineup and knows that he's going to have him, he's going to think, this is like when I was in Milwaukee and I had Christian Yelich. You just want that MVP guy that's in your lineup that you can rely on. And I think all of us believe that Cody Bellinger is that guy. We saw it last year, and he's going to start to prove that last year wasn't a fluke today. This was something that I really, really felt like we needed to talk about, because this is an area where I've seen a lot of these guys, and I can give you some insight on this list. And I feel like MLB Pipeline, quite honestly, did a good job with this top prospect list. And there's years where I would look at these lists, and maybe not from MLB Pipeline, but, Baseball America does them, and, different publications do them, people do them, and they say, hey, here's our top prospect list. And you're like, well, I don't know. I mean, you're leaving someone off, or someone's too high. But I'm just going to give you my thoughts on this top prospect list as we look at it for the first time. It's the number one prospect is Pete Crow-Armstrong. It's it's just easy that way. He runs the bases. He plays defense. He was the defensive player of the year. He got to the big leagues last season, and maybe he got there a little bit premature, but the Cubs needed him at that time. Is he going to make the roster out of spring training? I would say if he was a stock and I was, kind of, if I was Fangraphs and I was handicapping it, I'd say he's probably got about a 13.6% chance to make the roster out of spring training. But anything can change. I mean, that could snap in a second. He's good enough to be in the big leagues, and he's an exciting player. I call him Hollywood Pete. Power, speed, and just the want and hunger to win. Cade Horton is second. Cade Horton could possibly be first. If he was ahead of Pete Crow-Armstrong on this list, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. The 22-year-old right-hander with a great fastball and an amazing slider, still working on the other two secondary pitches. But he, to me, is the best pitching prospect the Cubs have had since Pryor and Wood. Now, he's not Pryor and Wood. He's not throwing 100 miles an hour. It's a different type of pitching prospect. I've heard some people say, hey, I'd slot him in at, maybe the third spot in the rotation in the big leagues. I think he has the potential to be better than that, but we'll find out. I mean, this is a make or break season for him. But what I saw last year is basically a star that's got to work on being a little more consistent with first pitch strikes. And secondary pitches, but really love the guy. Maybe even, working on the changeup for the lefties. But look, the guy's got so many things that he can do, and he pitches inside, and he's kind of mean. Love Cade Horton at number 2. Owen Caissie would be the number 1 prospect in a ton of organizations. Cubs, he's third, and he's just as good as Pete Crow-Armstrong or Cade Horton. I mean, you're talking about 3 guys at the top of your list that you could really interchange. You've seen him now in spring training. You've seen the power that he has. Pull side power, opposite field power. He's a good defender. He's got a great arm. He knows what he's doing out on the diamond. He's mature beyond his age. I've heard him described from a Cubs executive as one of those, like a guy playing with like one of those kids' bats that you learn how to hit with, the big red bats. As a kid, because it just seems like his barrel's in the zone so much, and I couldn't agree with him more. He's your number 3 prospect. So 2 outfielders and a right-handed pitcher are 1, 2, and 3. Then Michael Busch is 4. I mean, like, he was at the top of the Dodgers list, and he's number 4 here. He was who the Cubs traded to get for first base. They're telling him he's 26 years old. It's time that he's got to go out there and perform. He put up huge numbers last year in the Pacific Coast League in the Dodgers organization. Left-handed bat with power, gets on base, can walk. He is what really could be one of the difference makers in the Cubs lineup, and they expect him to kind of look like Anthony Rizzo as far as a guy who did it in AAA, struggled in the big leagues. They expect him to make that jump this year offensively. He hasn't played a lot of first base since college. He's going to do a lot more of that, so I'm sure there's going to be some growing pains along the way, but a very solid number 4. Matt Shaw, moving up the list to number 5. He's listed as a shortstop and a second baseman. He's going to play a lot of third base. 22-year-old out of Maryland, 13th pick by the Cubs last year in the first round. He shot right up to Double-A, held his own there. 5'11", 185. How's the arm gonna look over at third base? I have no doubt in my mind, though, that he is going to figure out the balance, the footwork, the positioning of the position. He just seems like a natural and a perfectionist when it comes to playing the game. And you can tell that mentally he's done it for a long time. I mean, this is a guy that has developed as a baseball player for years, and he is exactly the type of guy that you want beating on the door to get to the big leagues, because, how much of the game is mental. He's going to dominate in that area. Number 6, the Jaguar, Kevin Alcantara. Another outfielder, the third outfielder in the top 6 prospects. Cubs got him from the Yankees in the Rizzo deal. You're talking about a 21-year-old with long arms and power. He's got to refine his game sometimes in the outfield. He still looks a little bit sloppy, but he does make the plays. This is going to be a year for the 6'6", 180-pounder, where he puts on body fat. He becomes more of a man, gets that man strength. And maybe he is the Dominican version of Dave Winfield when it's all said and done. Or maybe he's the Cubs version of Dale Murphy, but just that big gangly guy that gets those arms extended and does a lot of damage. That's number 6. James Triantos is the second baseman, number 7. All I have heard is that this guy is a hit machine, and you saw it in the Arizona Fall League. He got to Double-A right at the end of the season last year. Another one of those players. He's a second baseman by trade. Could he be a guy that puts Nico Horner on notice? Some people feel like, yeah, maybe he's a better hitter than Nico. 6'1", 195. He's a baseball player, and he's another really interesting prospect for the Cubs. I'll go through the top 10. Moises Ballesteros, catcher, first base. Got to work on the catching aspect of it, but the hitting part of it, it just seems to come easy. Ballesteros, great hands, wrist, able to put the ball in play, put it out on the field wherever he wants. He's only a 20-year-old, and he's in Double-A this year. This will be a season where he'll probably get a lot of time behind the plate, because if the Cubs can make him a defensive version of what he can do offensively at catcher, they're going to have maybe their catcher of the future. Number 9, Jordan Wicks. You guys all know Jordan Wicks got to the big leagues last year, 6'3", 220, the changeup specialist, but has a great fastball as well. Set hitters up, did a fantastic job. I think he's going to be the 5th man in the Cubs rotation, and he's off to a very good spring training. And then the number 10 guy is shortstop Jefferson Rojas. Starting to see him for the first time spring training. He's an A-ball player right now, only 18 years old, but it really shows you the depth that the Cubs have, because this top 10 list doesn't include Ben Brown, Alexander Canario. It doesn't have Matt Mervis in it, Luke Little, who's going to be in the big league bullpen as a lefty. BJ Murray played in the Futures game last year. He's listed as 18th. How about Luis Vazquez? He's on the 40-man roster. He is a shortstop that if something happens to Dansby Swanson defensively, maybe not as well, I'm trying to describe him here. This is a Gold Glove type of shortstop. Maybe not as polished as Dansby Swanson, who I love watching play defense, but a guy who makes all the plays, the strong arm, the footwork, and a big-time future. And last year he hit for the first time. If he continues to do that, watch out. Hayden McGarry, of course, a first baseman, converted from catcher with a lot of power. And Pablo Aliendo stays right where he was last year in the just about that same slot at catcher 23. But this list, even Porter Hodge, who's on the 40-man roster at 29, a guy who could make the big leagues in the bullpen at any time. But this top 10, top 20, top 30 list for the Cubs prospect-wise might not have as many of the elite superstars as the Cubs had back when they were developing Chris Bryant and Javi Baez. But you talk about depth, and as they say in the fight game, pound for pound, this is probably the best prospect list that I can remember the Cubs having from 1 to 30 in the last 25 years. There's just so many guys that could possibly make it to the big leagues. So it's really hard to sit here and say, hey, you got to put your money on this guy or that guy. But this list to me screams, we have competition. And that's exciting. And I think the other part about this list that I really like, and I haven't seen all these guys, but a lot of great mental baseball players, guys who understand the game. When you talk about Matt Shaw, or you talk about Alcantara, I mean, they're young guys, but they know how to play the game and they know how to win and they like to win. Triantos, same thing. So Pete Crow-Armstrong, one of the most competitive guys I've ever seen, and a headsy baseball player. So you look at this top 30 list and you can see where the scouting department has not only focused on guys that can play baseball, but guys who mentally understand baseball. And to me, as an old school baseball guy, that's something that I'm truly excited about. And with Craig Counsell in the big leagues, I can't wait to see who on this list ends up knocking the door down, kicking it down, and getting to the big leagues. Nick Madrigal left spring training, left a spring training game rather, on March the 4th with a cramp in his right leg. This is the time of year where stuff like that happens. You're getting used to playing. Maybe you didn't have enough fluids. The weather is definitely different than Arizona than other places. I don't know if he was at the complex or not. It's a question that I certainly would like to know. But for Madrigal to make an impact on the Cubs and to make an impact on this roster, and he's a guy that I've always liked. I like contact hitters. I like guys that go out and can learn. Like last year, watching him learn third base and how quickly he was able to do it and do it well. I like those kind of guys. The downside, though, to Madrigal isn't the lack of power to me. It's the injury bug. And it's something that he didn't have as an amateur player, but it's crept up a lot as a pro. Saw with the White Sox. And then last year, how many times was he on the IL? Hopefully this is just hey, I just need a little bit more fluids, get back in there and really compete for that third base spot, because I believe that competition makes the entire club better. And that's what I'm going to end on today. My last show before I'm out in Arizona, and that is Craig Counsell expects the third base battle to go into the season, something that he talked about. We're seeing Christopher Morel play over there. Patrick Wisdom will play third base. You're going to see Matt Shaw at third base. I don't think he's got a chance to make the team, but make the team out of spring training. He's got a chance to make the team this year, just not out of spring training. You got, and then, obviously got Madrigal and Wisdom and Shaw and Morel, right? So no one's going to win this job. It doesn't look like the Cubs are going to go out and get a JD Davis. They didn't sign, Matt Chapman. I think the reason why is that Craig Counsell was brought in to figure out how to get the best out of the guys you have in your organization. You don't always have to go out and sign the next guy, especially when we just went through that top 30 list. There's some ball players on that list. You can win a lot of games with those guys. And I think that's what the Cubs are going to try to figure out to do, what they're going to do at the third base job. So it should be interesting. I don't think anything's going to be determined in spring training as far as who gets that job. Although I feel like if Morel had a great camp, kept getting better defensively, positioning, which I've talked about before, footwork, being in the right spot, knowing where to be, that he could win the job a lot easier than everyone else just because of his offensive output and his athleticism. All right, guys, that's it for the show today. Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. And again, we've got that interview coming up with John Lieber. Had an absolute blast talking to him about baseball. I think it was about an hour long, and he came in studio here and we kicked it. And that's going to be something that you guys will be able to watch really soon. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thanks for hanging out with us. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Don't forget that our channel is brought to you by the Tennessee Smokies. Smokies are celebrating their first championship in 45 years. And on March 9th, they're giving away their championship rings to the players, which is going to be fantastic. I'll be there. I guess I'm going to talk. I guess I'm going to read some names, and I'm going to be really happy because I can't wait to see these guys with these championship rings. Again, first time in 45 years. But you can pick up stuff, smokiesbaseball.com/store. They've got a great baseball card store. They've also got amazing gear, Cubs and Smokies. So get it for yourself. And we will talk to you soon. Go Cubs.